Welcome everybody to our Money Matters class here at North Coast Church. So fun to see the chat and so many of you in so many different areas hopping on tonight. We've got Palm Bay, Florida, Oceanside, Point Loma, Sacramento, Fallbrook, Ramona, love it, San Diego, and a bunch more. Thank you for joining on here tonight as we try to just provide some tools in terms of financial planning. I know it's an area that most all of us could use a little extra help in. So once again, just kind of want to go over a few little basics as part of this call. First off, if you can keep your mics on mute, that would be a huge help. And then if you have any questions, you can put them into the chat. Paulette will be looking and monitoring that. And if you have a specific question, you can always do a direct message to Paulette Camilo, who's on the chat with us here tonight. And then we'll end up looking at some of those questions for a Q&A time a little bit later on. And then the money tool and the notes are in this chat as well. Ended up putting a link. Paulette will actually be putting some of the notes and fill-ins, and of course we're going to have them up here on the screen as we go through the night. Well, my name is Trent Jenkins. I'm our online community pastor, and with me is the wonderful Eric Waite, our CFO here at North Coast Church. And I just want to take a quick moment and just say thank you to so many of you that are here at North Coast Church, and this is your regular church home. And if this isn't your regular church home, we're glad you're with us here as well, as we just try to provide some tools to be able to help each and every one of us figure out this whole aspect of money. And then we have our online community that are located across the country. They're going to be watching this live or maybe a little bit later on. This will be a recording that we'll end up emailing out to others a little bit later on. But we're so honored to be able to have each and every one of you part of our church. You're part of our church regardless of where you're at around this country or around the world. Thanks for being a part of North Coast Church. So without further ado, Eric, thanks for joining us here tonight. Glad to have you. And give us a little bit of element. So where are you from? A little bit of background. Yeah. What makes you qualified to talk about money? Because, listen, I might be hosting, but I am not the one giving advice. So what makes you qualified for this money factor?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Trenton. I just am so love this topic, love to be part of this. I love what God does and how much He speaks on money. And so being able to combine my financial background with my love for the local church and ministry has put us in a place to really want to offer this class. So a little bit about myself. I'm a Southern California native, but I spent the last 30 years out post-college living in Arizona. So for 20-ish plus years, I lived in the finance, banking, lending, financial planning world for a long time. And then about 10 years ago, God got a hold of my heart, and I served as a CFO for a really large church in the Arizona area, in the Phoenix market. And have recently come and moved back to Southern California, and I'm now the CFO here at North Coast Church, and I've been on staff about 7 months now here with this church in this community. So excited to be back in California.
So to say the least, you know a few things about numbers.
Little bit. And so in my professional career, prior to being in the church space, and this is not meant as a bragging point by any stretch, but I probably have worked with over 10,000 families in my life, and just in terms of their unique financial situations and whether they were buying a house or buying a business or had financial struggles, just the number of people that I've worked with. So I've just seen a lot.
Yeah.
And so just really excited to be part of this.
Well, I would rather have that for sure with somebody that's actually have some experience in this and also comes at it with a biblical perspective on that. And why is that important to you, Eric?
Just so important. I mean, over the years, just seeing people struggle, and certainly seeing how people's faith journey has gone along the way, where they have, lived a life that was a certain way. And so often in church world with pastors, we hear things like, gosh, I got tired of living my life this way. I got tired of doing this, and God finally got a hold of my heart. And then we see the benefits of how their life has changed when they started following Jesus. Well, after I took a deep dive into what Scripture had to say about money and saw that God wrote a lot about it, I learned and saw over the years that a lot of times it was the last place that people really wanted to surrender to God. And when I started to see and coach people through the biblical principles that God laid out in finance, I watched their maturity, their stress levels go down. When the storms of life hit them, they just navigated them much better. And so I really, really got passionate about wanting to see how God's word played into how we manage our money, because it really ended up, for a lot of people, in my experience, had been the last place they wanted to part with and really give that over to God.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard area. Our area of finances, it's something we earn, we strive for, but it also can be an element of shame as well. And I just want to encourage you as you're coming on, this isn't going to be a class shaming anybody of where you're at. The fact is, if you're needing financial help and you're watching this right now, way to go. That is awesome. That is such a huge step in saying, you know what, I'm going to try to get some help and try to figure some things out for this coming year. Or maybe you're just trying to do some financial planning with some goals. Then way to go. That's awesome. You're taking a huge step here as we go on with this workshop tonight. Okay, so as we're going through this call, and if there's something that really kind of speaks to you, put it in the chat. We'd love to be able to see that and say, give something a thumbs up when Paula ends up posting one of the quotes or one of the fill-ins. We encourage you to participate in this. So it is a live class and not just something that you're watching online. There's so many of you that are watching from all over. Just saw Las Vegas is on. So good to see you on here. Way good to be with you here tonight. All right. Here we go. We're going to dive into this, Eric. Why don't you scoot over just a tad this way? All right. That way, there you go. That way, oh, much better. Someone put on there, hey, he's in front of the screen. All right. So we're going to get nice and tight here, and we're going to start going through our class here tonight. So money matters. First thing here, our past. What does our past, why is it so significant? I don't really want to talk about my past, Eric.
Yeah, sometimes we're going to look at that subject and think, oh, wow, you're really going to pour under the hood and start to look at maybe some things that I'm not so proud of. And that can happen anywhere in our lives, and certainly with money. But I think it's a great starting place for us to look at, because so often, our past behaviors are indicative of what our future behavior is going to be. And maybe some of us have some past that we would like to have really far in that far rear view mirror. And that's okay. Like Trent said, it's really exciting that people are part of a class like this, because there is no wrong answer, there is no bad answer, but in the end, we're all trying to get better at it. And so sometimes taking a look back into our past kind of helps us identify some patterns, some thoughts, some ways we may have approached money. And maybe some of us are great at it, and our past was wonderful, and we had some wonderful influences. But some of us maybe, not so much, and that obviously led to maybe some of the behaviors that put us in the financial position we're in now. So when it starts off with this, one of the first questions is, oftentimes we say, where did we get our whole attitude on money, and how did we look at it? So on the screen, a quick question. If you have the handout in front of you, we have it there in front of you. And it says, when it came to managing money, my parents were. And I've got 6 choices on there for you to look at, because oftentimes we look back in our own homes and we say, gosh, growing up, what did finances look like? Were my parents geniuses at it? Were they better than most? Just kind of okay? They weren't good. They just really didn't have a clue, or we put the other answer on there for you as well, because maybe none of those fit for you. So I don't know, Trent. I mean, let's hit you with that question. What was your household like, and what you could remember growing up?
Yeah, I'd say my parents did decent about money, but we didn't necessarily talk about it a ton.
Yeah.
So my dad kept that knowledge kind of close to it. There was this joke where I would always say, Dad, if I combine my money with your money, then how much money would we have? Because I had no idea necessarily where we were at financially. He always managed it well for us.
Yeah.
So there's that side where, okay, we did good, but then I don't know that I necessarily got a lot of knowledge necessarily from that particular area.
Yeah, and I think that's probably common for some of us, that as we became adults or started managing it, we found ourselves in a place of trying to figure it out on our own, or find a webinar or a blog or read a book or something, or maybe education got us somewhere. But if we really look back, sometimes, what we saw in our own household plays out. For me, I grew up in a 2-parent household where Dad kind of handled everything, and we didn't have a lot of money, but we had all of our needs met. But I can remember certain times watching, hey, Mom and Dad, tons of papers strewn across the kitchen table, and my sister and I ushered out of the room, and some tense conversations happening in the other room. And so you kind of felt, I was like, wow, that's pretty rough what's going on right now. I don't think it's a happy household right now. They're really intense with each other. And so kind of I grew up under the place of going, wow, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have a house like that. I don't want to grow up with tension and stress and hushing the kids into the other room. And so for many of you, you probably have different stories. You have different things. Some were like, Trent's experience, maybe some like mine, maybe some, my wife's family grew up in a space where they didn't talk about it at all. And then there was a lot of secrets and a lot of things were hidden and kept. And boy, did that lead to a lot of stress later in life because the one person that managed the money didn't communicate at all with the other person. And some really bad habits, came into it. And so, my wife is from a place that she lacks a lot of trust in the relationship. So our marriage has had to figure out what that looks like for how we manage money. So as you think about that, looking back into our past is a really great place to start to see how our attitude is. How did we think about money? Next question we have on there was, who handled the finances and paid the bills? And so often you alluded to, and your dad handled it, my dad handled it. But I think sometimes, it's important that in a joint household, maybe married couples, or if you're single, you'd handle it on your own. But it's super important that people understand who's handling it. There's an aspect of that.
There's an interesting element, though. I felt like it was my mom and dad had particular roles. Yeah. And it felt like traditionally, this is what I needed to do, and this is what my wife needed to do. But the reality was my wife is way more detailed than I. Yeah. And so I was trying so hard to do my role in it, kind of modeling after my parents, when the reality was she was more detailed at some of those things than I was. And so it would have been helpful if we had talked about it initially.
Yeah. And a really unique thing that happens is sometimes it just defaults to the person that makes more money. If you have a 2-income household, they'll be like, well, the person that makes more money should have more say, should have more control. And to your point, that might not necessarily be the skill set that person has. They may just have a career or a job path that paid them more, but they may not be the detailed person that can actually handle it. So another important step when we start to analyze our past and think about where we came from in managing money. So.
Yeah. All right, and the last question here. Using credit cards and being in debt was a common way of life in my family. Yes or no? Put this in the chat. Yes or no? This is like, hey, we all probably have had a credit card or two in our. So was it a common use to be able to keep up with life in your family? Yes or no? Put it in the chat. So what's the point on this, Eric?
Well, this is just a place that I think about, especially in America, Western culture. Debt is a thing. Like it's a way of life for many of us, and depending the era where you grew up and kind of how you looked at finances, a lot of people. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, and our generation kind of grew up with until the big crash that happened in 08 and 09, which a lot of younger people had to live through, seeing what their parents went through, and those of us that are my age or older probably had some pain points through that. And I can remember growing up and as my career was progressing that debt was leverage. Debt was an idea. We were just going to sort of trade our way up. We were going to buy a house and not really care if we paid it off because we were going to go to the next one. Having credit card debt wasn't really a big deal. It was a way of life. And this Western culture that we have where we want to consume, we want to acquire, we want to keep up with the Joneses, whoever the Joneses are. And that was just kind of the way things were. So I think it is really important to think about our attitude around that as to how we felt about debt and what credit card debt looks like. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit because anybody that's ever had credit card debt or may currently have credit card debt, it can put you in an ugly place in life.
Yeah. I think this is really important in figuring out where you're at in your perspective of money of the past. For some of you, you had parents that were savers, but maybe savers to the point where you held on too tight and it's impacted how you end up spending your money or even planning today. Or maybe you had spenders and it was just like there was no money. You're always trying to make sure you had enough on the table, or maybe your parents maybe just didn't earn a ton. But it's impacted how we think about money. Yeah. And so just keep that in mind as we go through this entire class. Eric has some incredible principles for us, but we want to make sure that our past isn't dictating our future.
Right.
Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so we're moving on to our present.
So when we want to talk about our present, it's super important. I mean, we think about this, and oftentimes we have visions and dreams, but we may not even be taking a real hard look in the mirror at where we may currently be at. And so that's a starting place for us. So we've sort of laid a little bit of groundwork to say what's our past look like, and now we got to take a hard look in the mirror and say what does the present look like. And so one of the worksheets that we have for you guys, and possibly we handed it out, was it's just a worksheet that we call it your present financial status. And in business, we would call this a balance sheet. It's no more than what do I own versus what do I owe. And so the worksheet just is to have you list out what are the things that you have. What's liquid, what we would call cash, checking accounts, savings accounts, cash that you have. And then if you have stocks or bonds, retirements, if you own real estate, vehicles, things that you own. So we want to get a good picture of where we're currently sitting in life with what we own. And then the bottom half of the form that we have is what do we owe? And for the most part, obviously we would love the top number to be much bigger than the bottom number. We would like our assets to be bigger than our liabilities. We want what we own to be bigger than what we owe. But that might not be the case for all of us.
Man, yeah, we wish it was.
Right.
Right? So, when we're going to this, sometimes we can get caught up in, we don't really want to see what this number looks like. Yeah. But what's the pitfall in that?
Yeah, so it's just not facing reality. It's the head in the sand syndrome that I think some people have because they might look at this and think, I don't think mine's very good right now. And so I'm just going to not pay attention to it and I'm not going to look at it. But it's really critical and really important because when we want to put a solid financial plan together, it's really important to know where we are currently standing. I love there's an acronym out there that I used in a teaching class before that was called the GROW mentality, and stands for each letter stands for something, and it's goals, reality, options, and what's next. That's GROW. So goals, reality, options, and then what's next. So in our financial plan, we should have some goals. We should be having something we're striving towards. Maybe it's buying a house, maybe it's paying off debt, maybe it's setting aside, future retirement plans or things that you would hope to do. But it's really, really important that we have goals in our plan. But the next part of that is the reality. We can have goals, but if our reality doesn't say that, I would certainly love to have a beach house in Carlsbad overlooking the ocean. That's not my reality. That's a goal, but it's not my reality. My reality has to tell me, okay, then we look at the options. What options do I have? If that's my goal, but my reality says I can't line up to that, then I have to understand what options I have in front of me, and then definitely going to the W to say what's next. What is the next action step that I can take in order to make my goals? And so when we don't pay attention to this present financial status, boy, we are far from trying to implement any type of plan to take us forward in what we would really like to accomplish.
Right. Okay. So just to kind of put maybe some people's, some people might be on edge, like, am I going to have to give up this thing?
Yeah.
Right. As we look at here, there's your mortgage, there's vehicle loans, there's personal debt, and some of these we can get rid of them, and some we can't. So is it just that I'm doomed if I'm in the red here, Eric?
No, you would want to make a plan, and that's part of the financial planning process, where we're going to get into some really practical steps that are going to help you get through this. If you happen to look at that present financial status and say, boy, I'm not real pleased with what this looks like.
Yeah. So don't get overwhelmed yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't get overwhelmed yet. That's the whole point of this, is we're going to work a plan.
Yeah, exactly. So as we go through this, we want to say you've looked at it. When you look at that and you've taken the time to write everything down, ask yourself the next question that we have up here. What caught your attention? What is it that jumps out? There should probably be something. I used to always tell all of the people during financial coaching and planning was, sometimes when you're working with a professional, and for many of you that might be the next step, is to get wise counsel through the process and find somebody that can help you if you feel really stuck in where you're at. But I think it's important, and people would identify, would tell them, think of me as your heart doctor. And so I'm going to look at it. There's no good heart or bad heart. It's just how healthy are you? And so some of you, I can look at your present financial status and say, you're ready to run a marathon. And others, we might look at it and say, you're close to triple bypass surgery at this point. And there's not a good answer. Neither one is right or wrong. Neither one is good or bad. It's just what is the next step that we need to take in getting you healthy.
Yes, I don't know that I want to be in the triple bypass.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so perspective on debt?
Yeah, so I think it's important as you're looking at your thing, you might look at this and your perspective on debt might be a little bit of what we talked about before in that past with us, that debt is a way of life. Debt is something that you're very comfortable with. I think Solomon and Proverbs might have a little bit to say about perspective from a Christian perspective on where we think about debt, and I think that's something that we need to pray about and think about. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about perspectives on debt. But I think in your mind, you need to have the mindset of where you're at.
Yeah.
And then we go on to, are you good at budgeting and planning? And if not, who could you ask for advice or help? And we talked about a little bit about that. So I don't know. Have you ever found yourself in a spot where you said, boy, it's really time that I get some wise counsel?
Yes. Yes. And typically it's when I should have asked for it a couple months previous.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage you, don't let it snowball in terms of, I really should, and then you keep on putting it off until the point where now you're more in the emergency state rather than the maintenance state of, I just need to make a few tweaks versus I need bypass surgery.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
All right, and then last one.
This is a fun conversation to have. Just over the years of working with so many families and individuals over the years, it's really, really, I think, fascinating that God wired us in a certain way that we tend to fall into these camps of it's pretty easy to identify I'm a spender or I'm a saver. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in a lot of couples and families that I've worked with, oftentimes it's true, opposites attract. So you might find one of you's a spender and one of you's a saver. That's not uncommon. In my household, I have 2 business degrees and have taught finance for a really long time. So you probably all would say, Eric, I bet you're a saver because you really understand this well. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I am a spender. But I happen to marry what I would call a crazy psycho saver. And I mean that in the most loving way. So Tina, if you're watching this, I endearingly can joke with you about this. But it was super important in our relationship to identify those patterns of how we choose to deal with money. And there was a lot of rules and parameters that we had to sort of set up in our household to deal with Eric the spender and Tina the saver.
Yeah, just claim it right now. Put it in the chat. Are you a spender or a saver? Because neither is right or wrong. I mean, we do need to spend stuff.
Yeah.
And we do need to save stuff. But there's a negative on each of them. I know I'm a spender. Yeah. And the problem is I married a spender too.
Okay.
So we got to make sure that we mind our P's and Q's when it comes to finances. Yeah. So, I see a bunch of the savers claim it. The savers claim it. Spenders, you got to love it. There's probably some reason you love being a spender. So that's fun. All right.
Yeah. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with either. Funny stories I can share with you in our household. So some of the rules we had to put up is where do the bank statements and the credit card statements in my household go? My wife has to get those. She gets the mail and opens them and checks them because she has to say, hey, Eric, were you a ding-dong this month and you went out and spent something that wasn't within the budget or wasn't something? But it's just a wiring that I have. I'll just tend to do that. And by the same turn, I have to tell her, honey, we're going on vacation. We've set aside the money. We have it in the account. We can actually go enjoy ourselves. And so, if you're have a 2 or more in your family and you're looking at it and you're trying to decide, what works. Sometimes I think of the old Punnett square that was in in school in science class when we were trying to figure out if I marry that person, are we going to have curly hair? Are we going to have attached earlobes or not attached earlobes? You look at all those things and you try to pick the dominant and recessive. So I think of it the same way. And so in your household, you're thinking, that's got spender. Well, they're on the trail to bankruptcy, kind of thing. And then you would look at, I tease the savers, and I think, well, you all sit around and go, well, our 401k is performing very well, but we've never done anything fun. And so it's kind of a place that you need to figure out how you're wired and how to do that the best way.
And then we'll talk through some tools a little bit later. Like if you're a spender, then how do you spend without feeling guilty?
Right.
And then if you're a saver, how do you let somebody spend and not lord it over them that you've saved some particular money? Exactly. So we'll get to that in a minute. All right, future goals. Future goals here.
Yeah, so this is where we're going to start to get in and dive into some practical stuff for you guys, some tools to hopefully make your financial future brighter and better, and get us all a little bit better at this, at how we manage what
Right.
God's given us.
All right. Mindset. What's our mindset?
Yeah, so God actually has a lot to say about this, and thinking back to, raising kids and raising a family, and you have daughters, Trent, and just trying to think about, do you ever remember a time when they were learning how to read, or you were teaching them the English language, that you ever taught them the word mine? Do you remember seeing that in a book?
Never.
And I think it's funny. I think it's a little irony that God has put on us that, that was a word we all learned, and sometimes we cling to it really, really strongly for most of our lives, is that we operate in a mindset. And we want to just do that. And God really wants to get a hold of our hearts and really switch that for us. And so that's a really, really big thing as we start to talk about financial planning, where we need to change how we think about what God has given us. And so the mindset is to do that. And so, the very first thing that we want to touch on is having the good mindset. And that is to say that God is my supplier, or is my source and supplier. So if you're following along on the handout, that's the two first things that we have there. Is God is my source and supplier. And I put a couple of biblical references on there, both in Romans and Matthew in the New Testament, where there's some really good scripture. I'm not going to read it right now, but that where God points to, saying, hey, these are places that we need to look to Him, understanding that we don't we just get to manage what He's given us during the time that we're here on earth.
Oh, that's right. Like Matthew 6, just real quick, is just about not storing up treasures here on earth.
Right.
But our treasures are to be stored in heaven. Basically, everything that we own here is going to rot, it's going to rust, it's going to go away, or it's just going to be old news. I mean, think of how many different phones you've gone through in the last 10 years, right? We spend up, we save, and then it's obsolete in just a couple of years.
Yeah.
So where are we putting our sources, and are we looking to Him as our source?
Yeah, and so any of you that happened to listen to Pastor Chris's message this past weekend here at North Coast, he referenced that. He kind of talked a little bit about that when he talked about, hey, what are we doing towards our 500-year plan? And that's something that, as Christians and as we're being good stewards of what God has given us, that is where we're pointing to. That is that place of planning for that 500 year, that eternity. So the passage in Matthew that's referencing storing up treasures in heaven really is kind of a test while we're here on earth to look at what God has given us. So we recognize Him as our source and supplier, and we want to do a very good job managing what He's given us. And I can tell you that for many, many years of my life, it took me a long time to get to that place of a mindset that allowed my heart and my mind and my behaviors to reflect God is my source and supplier, and I'm not going to rely on mine.
Right. This whole mindset factor, I think it's huge in terms of just that reality of how we view what it is that we have.
Yeah.
There's so many different biblical principles on it, but if we can shift that mindset, there's that element where I think about sometimes my spending. If I were to spend this, am I not going to be able to provide for my girls?
Yeah.
Well, it automatically shifts my mindset. And do I want that item or not? No, I need to be able to feed my girls. In that same way of shifting a mindset and realizing that God gave it, just like a gift that someone else gives me, do I squander it? God gave me these things. And so how do I use them as a blessing to Him rather than squandering them on things that might be meaningless?
Yeah. I can remember there was a time when, thinking about taking my kids out, going to McDonald's and getting a Happy Meal. I took my daughter out. We were sitting in there, and she ate her meal, and then she went off to play in the play structure in the McDonald's, and I love McDonald's fries. I mean, they're really good. So she didn't finish her meal, and so she got done playing and came back, and I just kind of reached across the table and grabbed a handful of her fries, and as I took a bite, she reached out and hit my hand and said, "Dad, those are mine." And so, being the ever-loving father, you can imagine my gentle response back to her was, no, my response back to her was pretty harsh. I was like, "What do you mean mine? I think I worked all day. I think I paid for these. I think this is my money. Well, who are you to say that this is mine and you want to take them back?" But I think about that story, and I think in God's economy, what we should have done, what I would have, I would have traded my daughter in if she said this, because if she would have came back and said, "Father, thank you for meeting every one of my needs. Please have as many fries as you would like. I would think, whose child is this? This is not my child. But I think so often, I mean, that's a silly illustration to talk about. I think we treat God that way sometimes. We want to take the mine and slap the hand and keep it instead of saying, hey, God, thank you. You've met my needs. It's this inability to not recognize him in the moment.
Yeah. Now you might be saying to yourself right now, okay, let's get on to the budget stuff. And it's the next point, okay, just so you know. It's the next thing. But get this, folks, is that unless we shift our mindset, we don't shift our perspective, we end up in the exact same place that we once were. We have to shift our mindset, or else we're going to continue in the same rhythm and pattern that we have always had. So I want to encourage you as you go through this, like, don't just skip over this aspect. It's a matter of understanding that all that we receive is from him. Okay, and then I just want to remind you guys, make sure our microphones are on mute as we're continuing to go through. I know every once in a while they creep on and then the cat starts meowing and everybody else can't listen. So I just want to encourage you with that. All right, we're going to make a budget. Make a budget, Eric.
Yeah, so this is oftentimes we hear this word and it really conjures up a lot of feelings that we don't really like. It's kind of like going on a diet. We think, uh-oh, this is going to be painful, this is going to be ugly. But I can tell you that a lot of people, when they figure out a good budgeting system, a good budgeting process, it actually frees you up. It actually puts you in a place that you end up with a lot of choice, you end up with a lot of freedom that we're all looking for. So it's very, very important that we have taken the time to establish a principle-based budget.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the first thing, budgeting is a team sport.
Yeah, so budgeting is a team sport. So this is kind of back to, if you're a couple or a household or married, you need to make sure that you're including the other person in that. So if you have joint incomes or there's two of you that are both spending and saving in your plan, it really needs to be a team sport. It cannot be just, I trust that person and they're going to go off and do it. It's over the years and the thousands of couples that I've worked with, oftentimes when they don't involve the other partner into the budget planning or into the financial process, it's usually the first place that we see a lot of dysfunction.
Yeah. I would go so far to say it doesn't matter if you're single or married or whatever. Blind spots are called blind spots because we don't realize what we don't know. And so if you're the only person, you say, my spouse doesn't really care about the budget. Okay, then maybe their perspective, isn't as needed, or they don't really care. But you still might want to have somebody else look over what you're already planning and looking at, so that you don't have the blind spots and you end up a few years down the line regretting it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most common phrases that I get in the budget planning process is, boy, Eric, I feel like money falls through my fingertips. And as a financial planner or a financial coach with people, you would say, boy, that doesn't seem like that should be real, because if we are making a plan and if we are tracking, and the next point on here is keeping good records. You have to be able to have a scorecard in what you do. You have to pay attention to what you're doing. And too often nowadays, for those of us that are a little bit older, we remember balancing a checkbook, and I think that doesn't happen for people very much anymore. And I think that, but there's great apps, there's great software, there's great tools that are out there. Your banking should do this, but you've got to pay attention and you've got to know where your money's going, so that you don't get to the end of the month and go, well, there's more month than money. And find yourself in places where money's falling through your fingertips. That just should not be a thing. You should know.
Okay, so let's stop right here real quick. Let me ask you a couple questions on this, because there's this side of, like, my mom, she used to fill in that balance sheet, right? And she made sure every penny was there, stay up late, making sure it was there. But today, we have the apps. I can go download my transactions right now. So the bank's doing a good job keeping records for me.
Yeah.
So help me understand, help others understand, why is it I need to be looking at all of these things, and what's a good rhythm of looking at this from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that you've got to define, and it's a great phrase that you use to define a rhythm. And, some of you, my wife being the super saver, she would be on the app every day and knowing exactly where everything went. That might be a little extreme, but for some of you, that might be the rhythm that you like and knowing. But I would say at least once or twice a month that you're going back and paying attention to where your money has gone, and so that you have a spot that you're just in the know. that not paying attention to it, that not looking at the assets, the what I own and what I owe, and checking on that. I would say that type of thing you could check once or twice a year to see where you're standing and how you're progressing. But I think the budget needs to be done at least monthly, that you need to be paying attention to what's happening. I mean, banks are great, and please find tools, use your banking app. There's a great app called Mint out there that ties in with a lot of banks, that works really well, that does great charts for you and helps you track it. But if you're not using anything, please find a tool that you can find most beneficial for you.
And when you're looking at the transactions, are you then categorizing them as you go through them?
Yeah, I do. So I place my transactions into, was it groceries? Was it dining out? Was it entertainment? And that's going to be an individual choice for everybody to decide how granular you want to get, how detailed you want to get with your categories. But you absolutely should be doing that to make sure that you have a good idea of where it's going.
So for the individual that gets caught up on analysis paralysis,
yeah.
Meaning, I don't know which category should I put this in, or maybe you try to create too many categories, and so now you're putting into 5 different. What would be your recommendation for them?
Yeah, I would say that is that if that doesn't work for you, or you're getting paralyzed by the process, then you are making it too detailed. So if you get to the place of like, man, all I feel is I'm spending so much time record keeping, and for anybody that's not a bookkeeper, you might feel record keeping is a little bit cumbersome. Make big categories, make big things that you can talk about. Maybe it's just food, and that could include dining out and groceries that you buy, or what you're doing, entertainment. I mean, there's going to be certain things that you're going to look at that you just know. You're going to have things that are in the know. I know what my rent or mortgage payment is. I know about what my utilities are. And you'll see, we'll go through the example here in a second where the budget worksheet that I have for you guys kind of sets some big categories for us. And so hopefully it's a helpful tool for you. But there are many out there. So I always tell everybody, when you're looking at a budgeting tool, the most important thing, most important, is find one that works for you. There's going to be, you may have to do some trial and error and find things, but there's going to be some systems that are just too much and that you just don't enjoy.
Yeah. So Mint, he mentioned, Rocket Money would be another one. QuickBooks would be. These are all easy ones that you can find online. All right. Choices: give, save, spend.
Yeah, so this is where we get into this magical moments of what happen every time we get dollars in our hands. So every time we have money that comes into us, we get to do one of 3 things. And that is our choice that we have. And those 3 things land in we can give the dollars, we can spend the dollars, or we can save the dollars. And so that's a place that the mindset, and as we're building this conversation with everybody today, is to talk about where we've been, where we're at, and where we would like to go. And so understanding, God has asked us to be good stewards of it. And so how are we going to manage the choice? How are we going to decide what to do? Give, save, and spend are the 3 spots. So just real quickly, I'll touch on giving. And so this is, the Bible has a lot to say about this. This is something that people need to pray about and think about. What am I going to do with the dollars that have been given, and how am I going to give? From the biblical perspective, investing in what's important to God. As I'm a Christian, as Chris always likes to say, a Christian, as I grow in my faith, investing in God's plan is what would make my God smile. And so for that place, giving to the local church. The local church was God's plan to help people get to heaven. Oftentimes people will say, well, Eric, I like to give to the United Way, I give to Red Cross, and my answer always is like, that's awesome. Those are wonderful organizations. They're meet a great humanitarian need, but they weren't created and designed for putting people in heaven, and that's the local church. So I encourage you to find a local church. This is definitely not a North Coast conversation. We're not talking about giving, but if North Coast is your local church, or wherever that local church that you find that you believe in what they're doing, that is really making God smile when we're investing in the local church, because that was His plan for getting people to heaven. Yeah,
I just add on to it, the whole idea of believing and then investing is that you are investing into God's kingdom, and make sure that, that, like, especially if you're investing or giving towards some other organizations, that you feel like they're advancing God's kingdom, that they're not, hoarding or not misusing those dollars, or you just feel compassion for them because they might not be doing well. Sometimes giving to things that aren't doing well isn't necessarily always the best use. Make sure it's an investment because you're moving God's kingdom forward.
Right.
Yeah. So. All right, so that's giving. And then just one quick question on that.
Yeah.
In terms of like, as we budget, the tithe was 10%, and for some people they're like, whoa, 10. How do I even do that? What would you recommend on that if they're saying, okay, I want to start with that principle. I want to start to give. Do I just bite the bullet and go with 10% right now?
Yeah, so for many of us, that's a hard question. You start to turn to Scripture and say, "Wow, that's big." And I said, "Eric, you look at my budget; it doesn't even add up. I can't even start there." And so, what I always encourage everybody is start with something. Start with a plan. It may have taken us quite a while to get to the financial position we're in, and maybe we're newer believers and we're newer at growing our faith. And so, I always just tell everybody, start with something. Start with a plan, and maybe this year it was 1%. And then you start to say, maybe I challenge myself to double that, and then maybe next year it's 2%, and maybe then it's 4%. But I always tell everybody start. Scripture's clear that God loves a cheerful giver. In 2 Corinthians, it talks about giving generously, and that we have a heart. At the end of the day, God's not after our money; He's after our heart. If He wanted our money, He'd just take it. So I think it's important that generosity breeds generosity, and you'll find that as you start to do this. So I always tell everybody to get back to that is just to start with something, start making a plan, and then you can grow that over time.
Just start somewhere. Yeah. All right. The next one, save. What do we do?
Yeah, so when we want to start talking about saving, we're going to just kind of, start from the very basic and the very bottom of this. And so the very first thing that we need to do in our financial plan when we want to talk about saving is to have a short-term savings fund. And this is to start off with just something that can meet a short-term emergency. So what we advise is we teach that you should have $1,000 in an emergency fund. And that would be money that, for some of us, we keep it in cash at home. For others, it might just be in a checking or savings account that isn't tied to anything else, that just sits there separately from us. But this is a space to put $1,000 aside to meet a short-term emergency.
Okay, and if people's perspective, well, I've got $1,000 on my credit card for that emergency.
Yeah, that would be the wrong way. That would not be the plan for doing that, and the debt problem with interest rates and what they charge on that is not the plan. So this would be to keep money sitting aside that's emergency. And for some of you, depending on the stage of life that you're in, you might need to do a little more than 1,000 or maybe a little less. The reason we pick 1,000 is most really quick emergencies that we weren't planning for oftentimes are under $1,000. But I can tell you there was a season in my household when my kids, they're all 2 years apart, they're young adults at this point, but when I had 19, 17, and 15 in the house, the two oldest of mine are daughters, and they had a little trouble driving, and they liked to have a few accidents here and there, and oftentimes they ran into their friends in parking lots. And I can tell you, so there was a season I kept about $2,000 on hand when they were driving, so that when my daughter rear-ended her friend in the parking lot, and it was $300 to fix the bumper, it was really easy for me to grab that $300 at home, go over and pay that other dad and say, hey, well, let's take care of this and not put it through insurance, and I can just pay that right away for you. So there was a season when my kids just didn't drive real well, and so I kept a little bit of extra cash on hand for the potential pitfalls that would happen at that time. Because for most people, the first place that they want to turn when that emergency happens, the hot water heater went out, we chipped a tooth at practice today, and we suddenly have a quick medical bill, everybody's first emergency fund is typically a credit card. And that is not the place to turn to in the event of an emergency.
Yeah, ultimately it's lingering for years on end when that's there.
Yeah.
So so get out of debt.
Yeah, so when we want to talk about savings, sometimes people will say, well, I can't really start to set away savings. I can't talk about the next step. So when we say step one, we've set aside the $1,000. Now if we've got some lingering debt sitting around, that would be the next thing that we need to attack in our financial plan, is to start to knock out debt that's in the way of accomplishing our goals, that's just dragging us down.
So you've got three different methods here: snowball, interest rate, good debt versus bad debt.
Yeah, so the first one is the snowball method. For any of you that are familiar with Dave Ramsey, he's a wonderful teacher, has a lot of great principles, and so this is one of the big methods he teaches, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. And so the snowball method is just simply we take a list and we would list out our debts, smallest to largest. and we put the littlest one on top, and we just work our way down, whatever the balance is. So I've got a credit card of $250 balance. I've got one with 1,000, 5,000. Then I got a student loan of 10. I got a car of 20,000. And I just list those all in a row. And what the plan is that we will pay the minimum payment on all of those debts, except the smallest one that's on top. And that smallest one, we're going to try to find every way possible to throw extra money at that particular debt. Then as soon as that one's paid off, we take whatever we were paying and we just roll it to the next debt. So the $250 one, I had a Sears card. It was $250. I knocked that out. I'm not going to shop there anymore. I cut that card up. I'm done with Sears, and I just move on to the next one. And so it's a very effective way to do that, and we call it the snowball because it's just a snowball gathers snow as it goes down, and this is our way that we're going to increase how we pay off debt.
So if you have a minimum of $50 on one card and a minimum of the next, so we pay the first one off, and that was taking $50 a month, for instance. Now we're going to apply that to our second one, so now we're paying $100 instead of just $50 a month.
Exactly.
And keep it going from there.
Exactly. So, because too often people are just throwing a little bit at everything, or they're throwing, oh, this month I'm going to put an extra $100 on my car payment, and then I'm going to put an extra $20 next month on something else. And they're just haphazardly trying to pay things off. And unfortunately, we don't get anywhere. We continue every year at the end of the year when we look at our financial status or what we owe, and what we owe is still pretty big, and we still have several of those debts. So the snowball method is a really great one, and we often have find that psychologically we get momentum, we get excited when we can cross one off and move on to the next. It's just a very effective tool to get out of debt with a strategic plan to do so.
Okay, well, that's awesome. All right, and the interest rate method.
Yeah, so the interest rate method is similar, but in the interest rate method, we actually list our debts from the highest interest rate first, all the way down to the lowest. So if we happen to have something that's at a 12 or 15 or 18 or credit card that's at 25%, whatever it is, you would put the highest one first and then just put your lowest one last. And oftentimes, if you were to just kind of do the math on it, the interest rate method most often sometimes saves you a little bit more money than the snowball method. But over the years, we've found that it's just sometimes, what if you had a big balance? So if that top line debt was the highest interest rate and it was a $10 or $15 or $20,000 debt, it's going to take me a long time until I can cross that one off the list. And we found people are psychologically more in tune and stick with the plan a lot longer when they go with the snowball method. So oftentimes the interest rate might, in true dollars, save you a little bit of money, but it may take you a really long time to get the wins under your belt.
How hard should people be trying? I mean, I listen to Ramsey on this stuff. I mean, he can go crazy on it, but I appreciate his passion for it. How hard should people be putting all of their effort towards getting this debt gone?
Yeah, it is the big burden that's going to stop you from choice and goals, like I talked about earlier. I can have the mindset, but boy, that debt, if you Google out there and say, there's a lot of debt payoff calculators that you can find, and you can see that paying the minimum payment on a credit card, even a $5,000 or $6,000 credit card where you're only paying the minimum debt, boy, it's going to take you 20, 30, 40 years to pay that debt off. And you're, oftentimes you see the interest that you paid over time, you're paying double and triple what you originally put on that card. I psychologically, when I had to work myself out of debt, and when I, as a spender, I saw that, I really want that golf shirt. It's really cool. I'm going to have it. But I knew I was only going to pay the minimum payment on it. I realized over time, looking at the interest, oftentimes that $60 shirt was now going to be $180 when I added up all the interest. So it was a psychological trick I gave with myself, as I said, I don't care how on sale that is. If I'm only making the minimum payment, I'm paying 3 times the amount. And it actually made it really easy for me to walk right on past it and say, until I have the $60 to buy that shirt, there's no way I'm putting it on a credit card.
Okay, so let me ask you a practical question on this, though. I guess this is like, for the several people out there, or maybe just their own individual budget. So should I forego any nice things now that I'm looking, I want to get out of debt? Right?
Yeah.
So the golf shirt. So is it a matter, can I just budget how much extra I'm going to be putting towards these credit cards, and that way I do have some cash to still live life?
Yeah, I think it's striking that balance. I think there's a little bit. We're not asking you to forego living life. I don't think that's the right way to go, because you you'd be kind of a miser probably. You probably wouldn't be very happy. But I can tell you there's just little tiny tweaks that you can do within your monthly budget that can actually pay huge dividends. I can tell you personally, I had a little fun with it. I actually made a little game with myself. I used to have a little Starbucks habit that I would run through Starbucks and get a coffee and a snack every morning on my way to the office. And so that was $7, $8, $10 every time at Starbucks. So when I was working my way out of the debt that I had at the time, I decided to play a little game with it. And I said, okay, I'm going to forego the Starbucks. I'm going to go to the office. I'm just going to drink the drip coffee and bring a snack from home, bring an energy bar with me. And so when I did that, but I made it really fun that the minute I got to my desk, the very first thing I did was I sent $10 to Chase. And I had a Chase credit card, and I would every single day. So 5 days a week, I stopped Starbucks, and I would just go in and send that $10 I was going to give to Starbucks, I now sent it to Chase. So Chase, in a 20-day worth of working month, got an extra $200, and all I did was change one little habit in my life that really wasn't that big of a deal, and suddenly I was sending an extra $200 to Chase to knock down my credit card debt. So it was pretty easy to make a little tweak. And so there's a lot of great things that you can do. There's even some apps out there that will help us hunt down subscriptions that we don't need, extra things that we may be paying for, or slight little tweaks to our lifestyle that really, in the end, aren't that big of a deal and will pay huge dividends really quickly.
Yeah, I've got one like on Rocket Money. It has like this crush your debt account.
Yeah.
And you can say how much money I kind of want to be putting towards that. And then it basically takes money out of my account every single month. And then that way, oh, great. Now I actually have a little bit of a savings account because I don't know that it's actually taking money out and putting it into an account.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to be able to do that. There's a lot of fun tools these days. Okay, and then good debt versus bad debt, Eric.
Yeah, so I think, there's oftentimes, looking and sometimes, and not to pick on Mr. Ramsey, but he kind of gets into a place sometimes where he really focuses on eliminate everything. I kind of come from a little bit of a perspective that there are certain debts in our lives that aren't all debts need to be exhausted. And one of those would be real estate debt. I think that, saving for a home or taking out a mortgage for a home is a good thing. And so that would be a debt that I would say is a good debt to have. The bad debts that are out there would be the consumer debt, would be the credit card debt. I know cars is a tough one, especially if you live in California or you live in an area where there's not good mass transit. Cars is a necessary way of life, and so sometimes there's definitely good principles out there and good ways of looking at better ways of buying cars, other than walking onto the lot and paying full price for a new one. It can get very expensive, but I know that sometimes that's just tough. You need to own a car to get to work to pay for things, but I would still categorize car loans in the bad debt and something that we should try to strive to eliminate. Mortgages would be good debt. The other one that's out there that I think isn't a horrible thing to have and would be something that isn't horrible is a student loan debt. So for those of you that maybe had to take out student loans to advance yourself, I always look at things that are good debts. Is the asset that I'm acquiring, is it have the ability to appreciate? And a home really has the ability to appreciate. A car or credit card or the shirt that I bought is going to depreciate. In 5 years, I'm giving that shirt to Goodwill. So if I used a credit card to buy it, that was bad debt to go after that asset. And so when I think about it, but a house is appreciating, and when we talk about student loans, well, I took out a student loan to invest in myself. I could consider myself an appreciating asset in terms of what I could do in the marketplace. And if my education helps me get further in the marketplace, which statistically speaking, I know it's not an absolute, and there's a lot of careers out there that wouldn't require that, and people can be very successful without a college education. But if you find yourself in that place that you do have student loan debt, hopefully it has put you in a place that you are the appreciating asset and you will go out and have the opportunity to earn more in the marketplace based off of your education.
Yeah.
So.
Now, this is like personal example. You can tell me I was wrong or right. I'm going to put myself on blast on this. But I think there's some particular elements in life where if you agree upon with your spouse or somebody else, they can give you some advice. Like we had a situation where it was a medical deal where it was kind of urgent in terms of needing to take care of something in our family. And it was like, I'll go in debt to make sure that this is fixed, for somebody that was important to us. In our family. Was it absolutely 100% necessary? Maybe not, but was it going to maybe change the course of their life? Yeah. And so I think that there's that where there's the team side of it. Like, I'm happy to pay for this debt because I know that there's a future that's different
Right.
for somebody in our family.
Right, and I would put that in that space of that's an appreciating asset. We've taken
Right.
care of somebody that had a need, and being on the same page for that. I mean, Scripture does talk about just before Jesus left, he was telling the disciples, "In this world you will have trouble," is the next thing that he says. And so, what we hope to do with our financial plan is put ourselves in a place that when the storms of life, when things come, we hopefully, now obviously we can't absolutely cover every scenario, be prepared for everything, and catastrophes can happen, and companies can close, and people can get sick, and there can be loss of major wage earners and families, and certainly that can happen in our lives. But the hope is that we've built ourselves on a solid foundation, like the wise man that built his house on the rock and not the sand, that there's a place that we've built our financial house on that, so that when those things come, we can have a place to turn to. And at times, maybe it is something that would be a short-term debt, that we can get on that plan and figure out a really good way with a Rocket Money app that's going to help me get it behind us quickly. So the storms are going to come. We know that for sure. That's going to happen in our lives, and so hopefully with some good financial planning, we're prepared for that.
Yeah, I'd rather not have had to. Like,
Right.
if I had better savings for it, that would have been more ideal.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting to that part though. So let's see, we're here.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about, the second part in saving is, so we've done the short term. We've talked about step one being that short term $1,000 emergency fund, and then we've talked about getting out of debt, and that's eliminating the bad debts in our life. And now we're going to talk about, well, what's a long term? So now I need to think about, some long term savings, and this is really just thinking about our future hopes and dreams. So if you're following along on the handout, that's the next little fill in we have there is our future hopes and dreams. And so this is where we would talk about the first step of this is to set aside, talking about our hopes and dreams, is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Now, this is not your total budget, so when you look at a budget, it's not the bottom line of everything I spend money on, but this would be the things that we would consider living expenses. So it would be keeping a roof over your head, keeping your cell phone, I would put in the living expenses because pretty important that we have a cell phone, paying for fuel, paying for your health insurance or life insurance. Those are things that I would call living expenses, to have those set aside. And the reason that we talk about 3 to 6 months is just what you really need to look at is your lifestyle and the job that you have or the income sources that you have. How likely or easy are those to be replaced if you were to lose it? And so it's important to think about the field that you work in, the industry you work in. What is the if I lost my job today, how long would it be until I could be rehired somewhere else? And maybe some of you are in industries where, in 2 weeks I'm hired again, no problem. And others might be like, wow, I'm in a position where I know it's 3, 4, 5, 6 months of the interview process and, resumes out there and that whole process. So you may want to, put a little bit more aside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 10 to 15% in retirement.
Yeah, so this is really important. So after we've talked about our short-term savings, and now we've set aside some living expenses so that we can be ready if our income sources were lost. Now this long-term future hopes and dreams, this is where we would talk about looking into 10 to 15% in retirement. So if you find yourself with an employer that has any kind of match, so if there's some tax savings to be handled, and I'm not going to go really in depth into this. So if you work with a financial planner, they can walk you through some of these, or talk with your HR department where you work and figure out how you can contribute. But there's tax savings by having contributions to your retirement accounts go pre-tax, and that's something that'll build for the long-term hopes and dreams that you would like to have.
Which is basically our last fill-in for this slide.
Yeah, so it's really this thing that we in the finance world would call the time value of money. And that is just a little bit over a long time makes a huge difference. So I tell everybody, once you've gotten to this place where you said, hey, I'm ready to take this step, I'm ready to start investing, I'm ready to do something, I can tell you starting, the earlier you can start, the better. Nothing wrong if you find yourself in life and you're a little bit older and you said, well, I didn't really do it back then. You may just have to put a little bit more. So when you look at your budgeting process, you may just have to be a little bit more aggressive in that, because a little bit does grow over time.
Okay, so for those that are trying to pay debt off, do you wait until all of that debt is paid off before you start investing anything?
Yeah, and that's the part when referencing back to the good debt versus bad debt. So I would say that trying to eliminate the bad debts, the really high interest rate things that are in your life, you've got to do that first. And so I actually listened the other day. I heard Warren Buffett say something that was really funny. He would talk to a lady and she said, well, I have $1,000 to invest right now. Where should I put it? And he said, well, do you have any debt? And she said, well, I have $10,000 in credit card debt. And he said, well, what are you paying on the credit card debt? And she said, well, I'm paying 15%. And he said, well, can I give you some money to invest in that? Because clearly you're comfortable paying 15% on your debt. And the point was to let the person know that's really silly. I'm paying 15%, but yet I'm going to take the 1,000 and please give me a good stock tip or a mutual fund that I should invest in that maybe would pay 6, 7, or 8%. But you're already paying 15% on the debt. So it's really important that we get those high interest and bad debts out of the way first before we dive into investing. But I would say if your debt is in those appreciating assets, the student loans and the mortgages, then those are fine to carry as debts, and you would want to jump into investing right away.
Yeah. Ultimately, if we start investing, we're looking towards the future, and we don't want to look at the past.
Yeah.
But we got to take care of the past debt,
Right.
so we can go towards the future. Okay.
Right.
So, and then spend.
Yeah, so this was one of my favorite words that my wife and I came up with and that we loved in our financial plan was getting to a place when we started to spend, and we called it living with margin. And so when we go through the budget example, you're going to get to see, and that's a place that you really want to find yourself. You want to get to. So when we talk about this wonderful choice that we get when dollars are in our hands, do we have the opportunity to have some margin in our lives so that either when the storms come, but we also want to be ready when the opportunities come. And we want to have that positive thing. When the friend calls you up and says, hey, I've got a free place to stay down in Mexico for a week. You just got to fly down there and get the plane ticket and everything else is taken care of. Boy, wouldn't we love to say yes to all of that. But if we had to go, boy, I'm not ready for that opportunity to buy a plane ticket right now because I haven't set aside and I haven't decided that I've got some margin in my life that I have a place to pull from so that when the opportunities come up. I know sometimes financial planning classes focuses on the negative side of things, but I think there's a whole positive side of really good planning that we can have to build our lives with a little bit of margin so that both positives and negatives are going to come in life.
Yeah, and then spending decisions become spiritual decisions.
Yeah, and so when we're honoring God and when we've looked at the financial plan through the lens of the mindset that I'm managing what God has given me, spending decisions do become spiritual decisions. We start to think about it. We pray about it. We start to go to the other person and say, is this something that we need to really think about and pray about? And then we would set things up as to how spending is going to look in our lives, but we're going to seek God in that decision first.
Yeah. I know that I've seen some questions in there about investing and retirement and people that are already close to retirement or in retirement right now. So we'll get to those in just a minute. But we just want to take a quick second and we're going to go over establishing ground rules and just go over that one number budget that you gave us. So what are the ground rules in establishing our budget?
Yeah, and so the first one on this is to talk about any amount over, and I'm not even going to give you an answer here. This is one that you're going to fill in for yourselves. Any amount over blank needs a discussion, and that's just going to be a little bit different for all of us. My wife and I, we said any amount over $100, unless you're at Costco, needs a discussion.
Yeah, you'd never get through anything without that.
Can't get out of Costco for less than $100. At least we can't. So
yeah.
That was kind of a thing that we put in place. But for all of you out there, that's just going to be different for every household. And so you're going to want to say, hey, what is a ground rule that we can set up where this is going to be comfortable? Because I can tell you just over time, I've watched lots of controversy happen in households when they started to blame each other and they started to look at things, well, you did this or why'd you do this? And it really is a simple communication point that you would have established something in the beginning that just said, hey, that type of thing, I don't even worry about it because we've already established a threshold that we're going to say that's fine and it fits in the budget and we already know.
Yeah, it's just good communication. No one's trying to police you.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of making sure you guys are on the same page. But what about this hold, this 24-hour hold?
Yeah, and so I put in there a 24-hour hold. So sometimes when you're out there thinking about the big purchase or you're in the store and gosh, it just looks so bright and shiny and our emotions are caught up in it and it seems like something or it's a great deal and we have to have it. I can tell you over time and my experience has been it's still going to be there tomorrow. And so being able to go back and say, hey, I'm going to put a 24-hour hold before we make this decision. And then when we go back, I just run a filter on these certain things. Can I afford it? Do I need it? Do I really need it? Do I need it now? Do I have something like it already? is there something I could do with the money better than this? And then have I asked for wise advice? So if it was something, really big or confusing or something I didn't feel comfortable with, there's always people that I know in my life that I could call and run something past to say, what do you think about this?
Eric, the sale ends today. We're saving money. We're saving money with the sale.
Oh, you sound like my wife sometimes. So I can tell you that it's okay. It is literally okay. It is a rare occurrence that that's going to happen. So I can tell you that more often than not, the 24-hour hold has been a blessing rather than something that restricted me.
Mm-hmm. So over time, even if you do miss the sale this one time, you're going to be saving way more by applying the 24-hour hold on a regular basis.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. You have this last one here, and then we'll go to the budget.
Yeah, and so this is really important. We're going to talk through the budget, but there's a place that that we look at that you got to keep a scorecard. I mean, it's really important that you have some tool in your life. We're going to go through a budget example and show you some things here. But in addition to the budget, you also need to be doing what we do in business all the time is we look at our actuals versus our budget. And so once a month is over, I can say, wow, the budget was so pretty and everything looks so great and I had categories and it looked great. If you're using an app, it's got charts and graphs and everything looked good and it shows that everything's going to come out. And then all of a sudden I look over at my bank statement and I'm like, uh-oh, I got an NSF charge, or I've got more credit card debt than I thought I was going to have, or I made some bad choices. So it's really important that we keep a scorecard and we go back and compare that scorecard to the budget. Some of you might want to do it monthly, you could do it every couple of months, but it's really important that we're doing that actuals. Well, how have I actually performed? Because we can make a budget look pretty, but if we can't perform on it, it's never going to work. And one of my favorite quotes, I think we have it in the handouts, it's vision without execution is hallucination. And so I can have the best vision in the world and I can have the best laid plans, but if I can't execute on that, I really am hallucinating. I really am just dreaming at this point.
Yeah, I'm a dreamer.
Yeah.
I really am. It's one of my gift sets is dreaming, but man, a lot of dreams without any plans go nowhere.
Right.
That's the reality.
Right.
Okay, so we want to work on putting some of these dreams into a plan, into a budget, and see how the mighty CFO works a budget. All right, so we're going to put this on the screen, but then we're also going to work it through with the numbers. So here we go. Okay. So we're seeing this budget on our Zoom call here. So you should be able to see that pretty good on your screen. And so it starts off with, this is a one number budget. And if you've yet to download it, we encourage you to do so. And as we look at it, Eric, what do we want to do? So we got total income, and these are automatic calculations. And then ultimately income. So what do we want to put as an income?
Yeah, so just real quick, guys, on this form, you don't type anything at the top. You're going to watch as we do this. It'll fill it out for you. But what this is, the reason we call it a one-number budget, is that it's going to arrive at one number. And at the end, and that's where we see that says monthly margin, and I talked a little bit about that we would like to see where do we stand. So this helps us do both planning and execution, because we'll be able to say, hey, what does that look like? And for some of us, we're fine if that number says 0 at the top. We've put our income in, we're going to put a bunch of expenses in, and if that number at the top is 0, then we've accounted for everything. Others of us might feel more comfortable just saying, you know what, as long as there's a positive number up there, then I'm pretty happy. Some of us are going to go through this and we're going to get to the end and it might be a negative number, and then we're going to go, uh-oh, now this has pointed out some pain. Where do I go back in the planning process to start to think about maybe where am I missing on things and why do I have a negative number at the top? So
yeah, so that's huge.
So we'll just have some fun with this and we'll play around and enter some numbers so you can see how this tool works.
All right, so salary one, what, 50,000?
And this will be monthly, so we're doing this.
Okay, monthly. All right. So, see, this is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So take home pay monthly.
4,000.
4,000. Sounds good. And equal earning household.
There we go.
So another 4,000.
Okay.
All right.
And then we give a space for other income. So sometimes people, do some side jobs. They have a side hustle. They have a second or third source of income. We could put something in there if you have something, or, a lot of side jobs, but we can leave it blank for now. So you can see that We've got total income of 8,000. If you notice up at the top, you see the total income number is 8. Our margin is 8,000 because we haven't spent any of this money yet.
Yeah. So, gifts to the church, generosity, benevolence.
Yeah, so now this is just a space to say, hey, how do we feel, is there a place that we're going to start saying that, we should begin with? And when Scripture talks about, some first fruits giving, the reason why I put it first on the worksheet is to talk about, hey, let's see how we can honor God first with what's come in. And so we'll try this first and we'll put something in.
All right. So do you want to go with a 10% there?
Sure, let's try it.
So we're at 800 there. Not 8,000.
There we go. All right.
Generosity. Maybe we have a missionary that we want to support.
Sure.
All right. So we got 50 there.
Yeah.
And then we want to give to the care fund. So 75. Okay. So we're 925.
Yep. And you 12%. Can see, and the way the worksheet works, you can see that little box on the side turned green. So we're like, all right, green, that's good. That's a good thing in there. And you can see at the top, we're doing the math.
Okay, awesome. All right, moving on down, fixed expenses.
Yeah, so now we're going to start talking about what is it, this living expenses, what is it that keeps a roof over our head and keeps us going forward. So what's a common house payment?
Oh, man, that gets all over the place, right? So, I mean, depending upon where you're at in the country, let's go with 2,500.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
All right. So we'll say that they don't have a second, they don't rent. You want to say the 2,500 includes everything. So.
Yeah, it's property taxes are in it, let's say.
Yeah, so we'll just say everything associated. Oh, do you happen to live in a neighborhood that has an HOA?
You're getting taxed, people.
There we go.
Because you have a pool in your neighborhood, okay?
There we go. So now we can talk about, now we're going to get into utilities. So we've got a house, we've got a roof over our head, but we've got to heat it and cool it and take care of what it is to run a house.
All right, so we're going to say 125. That's pretty low probably these days.
Yeah. We'll say it's got solar. So
yeah. All right, this should be higher, right? This should be higher. Let's do 200.
Okay.
Average.
Yeah.
Across the year. Natural gas.
Yeah, good point that you said. This is average across the year. So this is just going to say, we know there's highs and lows and things fluctuate. And so this is interesting. Sometimes people would want to argue. I put cell phone on here in the fixed expenses. So I would say this is a fixed expense. We can't, pretty tough to live in the world without a cell phone these days. Not too many people still have landlines. So very, very important. So I put the cell phone on there.
Yeah. What do you want to put?
Just put 100.
100.
Say if there's a couple of you.
Life insurance.
Yeah, life insurance is important, and I like to keep it in the fixed expenses because we've already identified in this scenario that we're playing with that they own a house, and so important that we're going to protect our assets. So figuring out how to have good life insurance on you so that you're protecting the assets or you're replacing income if one of you were to need to have the income replaced in the household.
All right, let's put it 80.
Okay, perfect.
80 a month. Auto, that's probably another 100.
Yeah. And health insurance, this would just be, maybe some of you work for employers where it's all paid for, maybe some of you don't, and you need to contribute something, but we can.
Now, a lot of people are having to do childcare.
Yeah.
Even if it's just, babysitting.
Right.
Right? So let's put a couple $100 in there.
Yeah. Okay. So if you can see now we've talked about our fixed expenses. So this is taking care of the insurances that are important. We're protecting our assets. We've got a roof over our head. We've taken care of the utilities for it. And you can look over to the right there. It shows that our fixed expenses are $33.85, and that little box turned red. And so, why is it red? Well, in what we would say, a typical would to have your fixed expenses 15 to 35% of your total income. Ours happens to be 42%. Not necessarily a bad thing. It's just where we're sitting. And that may be indicative of where you live and what it costs to put a roof over your head.
Right. Okay, so now we'll go to our goals.
Yeah, and so this is really important. Oftentimes, if this is the first time that you're filling this out, I sometimes will skip over this right now because we need to. The easiest way to do this form is to put in the knowns. So if we put in the things that we know for sure we've already been decided and that we're already paying, let's throw those in. So we'll leave the goals out and we'll come back to those.
Okay, so the non-monthly expenses.
Yeah, so this is the non-monthly thing. So these are the things that sometimes people would say, it snuck up on me, I wasn't sure that it was out there. So, sometimes people have quarterly taxes, not sure in your scenario, but we'll skip to the next one. Car license plate fees. And so don't you just hate when that little email shows up and it's time to pay for the tags on your car and you're like, oh, that's this month? I hate that this is this month. I forgot about it. We shouldn't forget about it. We should put it in our financial plan and know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And
My
so-
brother-in-law loves it now because he moved to Tennessee. If you're in Tennessee, you got really cheap
Yeah.
tags out there. Okay, so let's put 400.
Okay. Well,
right.
that's monthly, so.
Oh, this is monthly.
Yeah,
Okay.
again, so I mean, if you had
So-
two cars, maybe 50, 70.
Yeah, so let's just put $50 in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes people might have annual insurance premiums, so if you paid your life insurance or your health insurance or something, depends. Just make sure you're putting it in. We'll leave it blank for the example right now, but sometimes people choose to do it that way because they get a discount by paying their insurance premium all at once.
School tuition, was this where you'd put, this isn't where you're going to put your school loan though, right?
Correct, yeah. This would
Okay.
just be if you have some ongoing tuition, maybe your family's chosen somewhere that requires that. This is the big one that's funny. Gifts, holiday, wedding, and birthdays. Some of the funniest conversations I've had with people is when they sit there and they go, "Oh my gosh, Eric, Christmas snuck up on me." And I just kind of laugh and look back at them and I'm like, we have this thing called a calendar and there's this thing called December 25th. So, what you really meant to say was Christmas snuck up on my financial plan. And I really hadn't planned for it. So again, we want to be good stewards. We want to set this in our plan, and we don't want the sneakiness to come up. And certainly those birthdays, and it seems like there'll be seasons of your life where every other week there's another birthday we're going to, and we've got to hit Target to get the gift card on our way to the birthday, and that just happens. So again, look back at what you've done in the past, or make a good guess at what that would be. monthly.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, if you're doing birthdays and all of that sort of stuff in there,
Yeah.
I mean, 100 goes by fast.
I was going to say, usually I would say it's got to be at least 200.
Yeah.
Just thinking when you factor in Christmas and things that you go to.
It's just the reality.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Another one-
Haircuts.
Haircut.
Oh man, we're in the
Dude, we are rolling.
good spot on this one. Eric and I on the haircuts, we can leave it 0.
We can, but
There is an advantage to us, but
we have lives.
Yes.
So
All right. since it's monthly, I'm just gonna put 50.
perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Home maintenance. Let's just give it something, right?
Yeah.
100.
Yeah, 75 or 100 is good. 100 is good. Throw 100 in. Yeah, and that's just the things that are just going to be those routine things. Hot water heater goes out, sprinklers, roof repair, cracks, just different things that we're going to deal with being a homeowner.
Yeah.
that
So
we
then I
have
just
to
put
do.
another 100 in there for just miscellaneous.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, now we get into some fun stuff. The flexible spending, this would be places that we have choice. We get to sort of control some of these on a monthly basis in here, and we put in groceries and dining out. And I can tell you that when we go through most financial plans, and a homework assignment I'm going to give you guys right now is, if you've never done this before or you don't have a good budgeting process, for the next week I want you to write down everything you spend money on. And I will tell you that this spot, these two lines, groceries and dining out, will most likely jump off the page at you when we just don't realize how much we spend in these two categories. We think in our financial plan this is what we've done, but when we go back, look at our scorecard and say, how did I do against what I planned for? Oftentimes, we sit with a jaw-dropping moment.
I would say this is the one area for most of us that's also snuck up on us because of inflation.
Absolutely.
Man, it doesn't seem like you can go out to a restaurant anymore with a reasonable amount of money you're spending.
Yeah.
And going to Costco, like you said, just wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. So, all right, let's put some numbers to it.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say we don't really know how big this family is, but just assuming, gosh, I don't know, groceries probably $750 a month.
Yeah.
Let's put that in, and maybe $500 on dining out, maybe
Yeah.
or maybe $750. I don't know.
I mean, the way things cost these days.
yeah, just depends
Okay.
what you have.
So this is different. School lunches.
Yeah, so I think we can stick with that and just try to
Okay.
say for this family size, we're really going to try to hold ourselves to $1,500 a month.
Okay. And they're still in the green,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yep. And you can see at the top, it's doing the calculation for us. You can see that we've got, what we're bringing home and what we have left over in that margin column. So,
Okay. So last one though, but this is a big one. So auto loans, credit cards.
yeah.
So we got to put some loans in here.
Yeah. So, historically speaking, I think a few years ago, the average car payment was about $350 a month. I think it's about $450 now. So I would say most people, they, probably have one. So
Yeah. So we'll do that, and we'll do a cheaper one, a 200.
there we go. There
Okay.
we go. That's pretty normal.
All right, and then credit card. These are your monthly
Yeah, just
minimums.
minimum monthly that we're going to put in here.
Okay, how many credit cards you saying we have?
You know, the average household in America has $8,000 to $10,000 in credit card debt. I think the last time that I researched it. So I would say maybe put 70. You know, two of them at 75. Say I've got two $4,000 credit cards, and say that's at 75.
Got one at 100.
Yeah, so that's pretty typical.
Okay. And then we probably have a student loan.
Yeah, so maybe just go.
Let's go 100 on that.
100 on that. Yep.
Okay.
All right. So we've taken care of a lot of things, but you notice so far we haven't done anything fun. We're just living right now.
Oh man.
So now we're going to get into some more choice items within the budget and talk about some personal things that we'd like to do. So do we have cable, internet? A lot of times those are bundled together. Sometimes people have them separately. So I don't know. What's normal?
Our house, we just have Netflix. So I'm just going to do 15 for that.
Okay.
Internet though?
I pay $65 a month is my internet bill.
Okay, so that's yours. Okay.
Fuel. We got 2 vehicles, so we better put gas in them.
And depends on if you live in California or wherever you're at. So I mean, we're talking a minimum of $500.
Probably
2 vehicles.
Yeah, 2 vehicles. Yep. Okay. So now we start to talk about and this would just be think about what you spent over the year: clothing, entertainment, vacations, date nights, maybe doctor's visits.
All right, I'm just going to put some numbers in here real quick so we can.
Yeah. These are just more some lifestyle stuff that we're talking
allowance. I got 2 kids. Oh, the margin is decreasing here. Vacation. I want to take a vacation, so $75 a month on that. I do want to take my wife out occasionally. Doctor visits. We don't need doctors.
Yeah.
And then blow money.
Blow money. So this is just kind of a fun one. This would be that part when we've established some ground rules in the relationship, and there's just going to be certain things. I am a golfer. My wife likes to get her nails done. So these are things that we've planned for. So it's like, well, what are we going to say that are just those things that we have put in a category that is like, you can spend that, I can spend this. We know what it is. We don't question it because we've planned for it.
Okay, let's say you're going to play golf for 50 and she's going to get her nails done for 50.
Perfect.
Okay, so we got 100 there. And then other things here.
We got a health club. Do we all carry around the little tag on our keychain for the health club that we're part of?
We'll put it in. We'll put $30 down.
Yeah. And then maybe co-pays on prescriptions.
Yeah.
Maybe 20, 25, say, or 50. Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right. So what we've just done is had a little fun with an example that I can tell you is really, really typical. Like, and hopefully you guys are all playing along with this and you're filling in your stuff for it, but this would be not uncommon. As I've done this class many, many times and gone through examples, this is really, really typical. And what can we see is we have a big red number at the top of a negative $385. So this is a household just trying to get by, trying to do what they can, and they actually have a negative number every month. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening is you start to go back and look at this and say, where are the places that I can make some adjustments, or how am I doing this every month? And sometimes people are sticking to this, but they're using their credit card every month. And so they're not really eliminating the debts, they're adding to it. So looking at this, and this would be, as you all look at this, or if you're looking at your own scenario, you got to dive in and you got to start to say, what are the places that I can make some adjustments? Do I need to, it's real simple. We either increase the income or decrease the outgo, and that's what we want to start to analyze in this budget plan.
All right. So as we look at this, so we're $385 in the debt, and we haven't put any money towards savings.
Right. Yeah. No financial goals.
No financial goals on this. And then I think so we're going to go to the big categories on this.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are going to look at this. Well, one of my biggest expenditures is giving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you eliminate that?
Yeah, I can tell you that that's probably the first thing that people would turn to, is they would start to say, it just doesn't add up. I can't make my ends meet every month and, go to the full 10% that we talked about. So in our example, we were wanting to do that. We were striving to do that, but it just might not be a reality. So that would be a place that we could pretty easily turn to. And I think people are just going to have to pray about that and decide about that and see where you land on that to do that. But that would be, in my experience, that's probably one of the first places that someone's going to knock that back.
That's where people are going to go. I'd challenge people, though, of the whole element of faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
That God is your provider. We know He's your provider. And if you've started with a particular number, just try to stick with that number. Doesn't mean, if you've been giving 100 and you're not at 10% right now or something like, just can you try to stick with that number and put that before God? I challenge you. It's the one area of the Bible where He challenges us.
Absolutely.
And He'll meet our needs in these areas. So I would challenge you to not look at that as the easy area to eliminate. But we get to food is another big one.
Yeah.
And then our car payments. So groceries, dining out, and car payments are the easy ones for us to potentially look at and eliminate.
Yeah, so there's places to say, depending on the car that I'm driving, is there ways that I can look at cheaper alternatives? Can I, find ways to reduce that or find another alternative?
Okay, so Eric, just in the last bit here, this is a fairly common scenario. This family's not making a ton of money.
Yeah.
And it's not like we put a crazy number of outlandish lifestyle on here. But there's elements where I think we get to a place where we say, I work hard, I deserve this. How do we get out of that mindset, and how do we tackle this to get it below 0?
Yeah, so what I tell people is I start off with a little acronym that I like. I call it SSE2. And that is stop, sell, eliminate, and a second income. And so the first thing I have to do is I have to stop. I have to stop something. I have to stop borrowing more money. I have to stop having the credit card debt. And so that's that. If the boat's taking on water, I've got to find a way to stop what's taking on the water. So I really try to do that. The first thing that I've got to do is look at my spending habits, look at what I'm doing. Like I talked about in my example, I adjusted a lifestyle and it helped me throw extra money at a debt. So the first thing I've got to do is I've got to stop something to right what I'm doing wrong. Then second is selling things. I think we all can look around and say, boy, I probably have too many things sitting around. If you just look at the world today, one of the fastest growing businesses that no matter what city you're living in, you can drive around on any corner, and boy, do we see storage centers going up everywhere. And all that tells us is we have a lot of stuff, and we actually can't even keep it in the house that we live in. We need to pay rent to someone else to hold it in a place that's not in our home. And so what is it that we have that we're all looking around saying, boy, I could sell this? And, the days of garage sales are probably gone for most of us. It's just not something that happens a lot. But, boy, there are some fantastic websites with neighborhood communities that have sales or, Facebook Marketplace. So many places that we can look at those extra things. And, boy, we can get rid of things that are sitting around that we're not using and we're doing. So finding opportunities to get rid of maybe some of the things that are in our life. And then eliminate, that's some of the stuff. Maybe I have to eliminate, the gym membership and for a season I'm just going to go, do runs in my neighborhood, or I'm going to do a program at home and I, really don't have the benefits of the gym, or I don't even go. So it's not really that hard, or is there certain things that I'm looking in my budget that are very easy for me to eliminate and do that. And then the last one is just the second income. The world is full of so many places right now that for a season, I don't think that, God wants us to work constantly and stretch ourselves so far that we don't have a life. But I think that sometimes there might be a certain season when we're working our way out of debt that we need to possibly look at something as a second job or a second income for a period of time. And there's, so many opportunities for people to find places to bring in a little bit extra money.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. And hopefully this has been helpful to all of you. This recording will get emailed out. I know that was one of the questions that you guys have been putting on. We will email this out to everybody that registered for the class, and we will make it available at North Coast Online, North Coast Church, in our online factor there. So thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We pray that you're going to be able to tackle all of your financial goals and get rid of that debt and to be able to live free without the chains of everything else. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next class. Thanks, everybody.